And so that just tells you
Vivek,
where I'm coming from in addressing that.
Are you currently in a massive multi-$100 million deal with Pfizer?
I'm not in any deal. I'm not affiliate. I've founded multiple companies.
Are you the 6th or 7th largest stockholder
Yes.
of Roivant, who is in a multi-$100 million deal with Pfizer?
So Roivant, I read the public information that you do. I'm not on the board, but Roivant did do a deal that licensed
You were on the board in
Pfizer.
February when the deal passed last winter.
Yeah,
What's up, YouTube family? Average Larry back again with another video. Welcome back and welcome if you're new here. Now, y'all know we don't waste too much time. We want to get right into these reactions. Real quick though, first, thank you to all my subscribers. We are this close to hitting 5,000. I knew we was gonna hit 5K before my birthday. Thank you, Lord. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy, new presidential candidate. I've been following him for a while. I like what he has to say, and I've been wanting to do a reaction to him, but I haven't found anything up until the day that was like either potent enough or recent enough for me to jump in with it. I just been doing my homework on him. But then today, Candace Owens drops a one-on-one between him and one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters, who goes by the name of Rogan O'Hanley, and they go in a nice little sparring match here. I think Vivek held his own, so let's check it out.
Vivek, going to you, what do you think, if anything, again, that was my own assessment, that the DeSantis campaign got wrong?
Well, look, I think there's two things. I mean, one is, I'm going to draw from my business experience here, Candace. One of the things you see in any startup, and every campaign in some sense is a startup, the ones that start with often too much money before they've defined their product market fit. That's what you define it in the business world, before you actually understand what your product even is. But if you start with loads of money, one of the things you see in startups that fail time and again, especially in the last 10 years with venture capital pouring in, is that those businesses actually are the ones that don't make it versus the ones that actually start scrappy. Don't start with too much money, but start with a clear product or a clear vision or a clear message in the case of a political campaign. And so I think in some sense, any campaign that is overburdened with like tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of super PAC dollars flowing in before they've figured out what they even want to stand for. This is Jeb Bush. This is Scott Walker. So in some sense, this is not new. We're just seeing
DeSantis,
an old and repeated pattern where the establishment pours in gobs of money to somebody who they think is going to be the person they want them to be, when that person isn't yet even sure what their vision or message is. And so I think we saw that in 2015 and 2016. We see that again. We see it, it's analog in the business world all the time. And so that's basically what I think happened here. I share Rogan's view that I think Ron DeSantis actually is quite a good governor.
Okay.
I think that there are also a number of other great governors in this country who don't get enough credit. You know, we could think about Kristi Noem or Kim Reynolds or Brian Kemp in Georgia. Not all of them seek the attention in the same way, but I think Ron DeSantis is on the list of good governors in this country, and he deserves credit for that. I think when it comes to the U.S. presidency, though, we need somebody who's not just an executor of a vision, of somebody else's vision. We need somebody who's actually bringing an independent vision of who we are as Americans. What do we actually stand for? What does it mean to be a citizen of this nation? I think we need a nationalist in the White House, and I just don't think that Ron DeSantis has that national vision yet, even though I view him more as a colleague than a competitor. I'm going to need him exactly where he is, as an excellent governor, as somebody who executes and gets things done. And so that's why I'm not going to be attacking him. I'm going to compliment him on where he's good, but everybody has their strengths and weaknesses.
I'm not going to be attacking him. You just shit on him and said, boy, you ain't ready to be president. You're a real good governor, though, but just stay where you at. I need you right there. You ain't got no vision. You good at executing my vision. So do what I tell you to do.
I think he can continue to be a good governor of Florida and maybe even play other roles in this country. But that's my assessment.
Regarding January 6th, there were some people that felt that you flip-flopped on your messaging when January 6th took place versus what you could be saying now. And Rogan, you were one of the people that felt this way. You said the messaging was switched. So I'll just let you ask him directly of what you felt he said and how you think his message has changed.
Yeah. So, you know, I also was, like many, surprised at Vivek's rise. And I saw at the Turning Point conference, people were like cheering for him. And I'm like, who even is this guy? I've never seen a critical interview. And so I started to to dig because, as
Okay.
people are pretty well aware, I'm a Trump supporter, have been since, 2016. And, the first thing that came across my mind is, why is this guy running against Trump as Trump is being indicted? And then I started to dig a little deeper on, Twitter, and I came across some passages from your book. And I don't know which book it is. It's one of the two.
Oh, so you didn't do your homework.
About January 6th, and it says, it was a dark day for democracy. The loser of the last election refused to concede the race, claimed the election was stolen, raised.
Look at Vivek's face right now. He look like a straight warrior. Like, man, hit me with your best shot. I'm finna chop.
Hundreds of millions of dollars from loyal supporters and is considering running for executive office. I'm referring, of course, to Donald Trump. Do you think that the 2020 election was fair? Do you think that Joe Biden got the most votes in American history, or do you think 2020 was rigged?
So I'll answer that. I think 2020 was rigged specifically by big tech, but I just want to say something at the outset, because this is the first time we're meeting, is that I've actually been a longtime fan and of your tweets particularly. And I understand that I did a little bit come out of nowhere, right? I was in the business world. I had no public footprint at all
right now
until 2020. And then really 2021 when I stepped down from my job as a CEO. So I invite the scrutiny. Some of it's bad faith, but then I take someone like you, and I understand your heart is actually in this for the country as opposed to some of the other trolls. And so that's why I'm engaging with this directly.
Some of the other trolls.
Let me be really clear about something. I've written 3 books in the last 18 months. That passage has now been floating around Twitter. I'd encourage you to read the book, or at least even the chapter that came from. Those lines were tongue-in-cheek, in part because those were the opening words of the chapter. It was a dark day for democracy. The winner refused to concede the election, raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Those exact words. I'm referring to, of course, Stacey Abrams. That was literally the opening paragraph of that chapter. And it turned out that those words were literally borrowed from a description of somebody else criticizing Donald Trump that I then cut and pasted. So look, I have detailed messaging on all of this, but you read that chapter and you read that book, it's easy for someone to airlift something out of Nation of Victims without reading the whole book. It was literally a satirical chapter that started with those words that someone had used against Donald Trump, with Stacey Abrams as the punchline. And here's the thing about the books I've written. I wasn't writing them with any intention of running for president, right? And so otherwise you'd read them and can this be misquoted? No. These are, if I may say so myself, I would say intellectual books. These are not candidate books, okay? These are books that were written in part of a career, 3 books in 20 months. Candace, and probably you, I don't know if you've written books as well, understand what it takes to write one. I've written 3 and they're not candidate books, are deeply introspective books. So much so that actually even some of the things that I said in Woke Inc., I've moved a little bit from today. What did I say in that book, and I stand by it today? 2 things that I think are really important points. The 2020 election was stolen principally by big tech. The Google search algorithms that suppressed actual stories that you could have read on Donald Trump. Hunter Biden laptop story, suppressed on the eve of an election. There's definitive data showing that actually would have changed the outcome of the election. I personally find that data, just like in terms of the raw numbers, even stronger than the data that's yet been presented on ballot fraud, though I think both existed. I've been very clear about where I stand on ballot fraud. Single day voting, election day as holiday, has to be paper ballots. And by the way, government issued ID matching the voter file.
Okay.
But I think what's more important to understand as well, and I talk about this in this book, is 2016 was actually even the other election that was stolen from Donald Trump, the election that he supposedly won, where he wasn't allowed to govern for those 4 years. And so the only thing I would say is there will be a lot of things that you and I may have slightly different points of view on. I think these will exist. But all I'll ask is, I know you're an intellectual as well. You're a guy who cares about the country. Read the books, not some sort of screenshot from Twitter of a purposefully airlifted passage. And about January 6th, what Candace mentioned, and I saw this in one of your tweets too, and I just want to address this, Rogan, just so you're aware.
Shit, he want all the smoke.
So I floated a passage where I said what Trump did that day was reprehensible on January 6th. I said this shortly thereafter. And again, that's another airlift. Read what it was. That wasn't a tweet from me. That was a reply to somebody else's tweet in response to a Wall Street Journal piece that I wrote 2 days after January 6th, or in the days after January 6th. I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal that said that censorship, systematic censorship in this country was the cause of January 6th. And in particular, it was government using tech companies to silence speech. And I said that that would be a friendly parley compared to what's to come. Somebody then asked me, do you excuse what Donald Trump did on that day? And I wanted to be clear, and it's something I'm saying today too, is that no, I would not have handled January 6th in the same way as Donald Trump. And that's a fact. And maybe you and I can disagree on that. I said it then, I stand by it today. But just like I said in the days after January 6th, which caused multiple advisors to my company to resign, which caused me to face great personal cost in the seat that I was in as a biotech CEO, that's the same thing I'm saying today. And so that's a long way of saying we may still have our disagreements, but I'd love to have those disagreements with the full context of what I've said rather than airlifting passages. I'm not accusing you of doing that, but that's what I've seen circulating a lot. And let's have real disagreements instead of fake ones. That's all.
So, I mean, it seems like he was ready for that question. He was like, yo, you took me out of context, bro. And when people take you out of context, it's very easy to paint whatever type of narrative that you want to paint about somebody and not necessarily the vision that they had when they were making said comments. So it's good that he was ready for that. He hit him back like, nah, this is what I said. This is why I said it. And I stand on it. Let's see what he's going to say.
Let me preface by saying I respect Vivek for coming on and having this discussion, knowing that I'm a very vocal critic. My main point is that Vivek does not believe there was actual election fraud with the ballots, that he can watch something like 2000.
See, he just said he does believe there was election fraud with the ballots. He just doesn't have proof that it was enough fraud to actually change the results of the election. That's what he said. He thinks the covering up of the story was definitely enough to change the results.
Vivek does not believe there was actual election fraud with the ballots, that he can watch something like 2,000 Mules. Did you see 2,000 Mules, Vivek?
I've seen part of it, I have to admit. I did not finish it, but
I highly recommend you go watch it because it's probably one of the most important documentaries in recent history that showed massive systemic election fraud across this country. And to me, as a vocal supporter and just a voice for the MAGA base, I will say, if you do not believe that there was election fraud beyond what big tech suppressed, that they are not muling around hundreds of thousands, if not millions of ballots, that if at 3 a.m. in the Detroit TCF arena, they didn't drop off hundreds of thousands of ballots on video, that the Gateway Pundit has exposed, that they were banned from Twitter, that there was no Republican supervisors, that we saw vote spikes in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania overnight in the dead of night, that they shut down Georgia for a water pipe break, and then suddenly they pull out ballots out of the under the table and start counting. If you don't think that there is election fraud, in my opinion, that is disqualifying for anyone running in the GOP, because this is not politics as normal.
I, based on everything I've seen, believe there was absolutely ballot fraud. Rogan, here's one of the things I'll say is we all have our areas of expertise. Until I decided to enter the political arena, as opposed to criticizing stakeholder capitalism and the World Economic Forum agenda and central bank digital currencies and ESG, where my focus has been, this has not been an area where I've dived as deep. So what I will say is, yes, there's been ballot fraud. What I see that is damningly convincing, driven by data, is that absolutely I have seen enough data to know that the 2020 outcome of the election would have been different if the Hunter Biden laptop story had not been suppressed, if Google had not made an illegal campaign contribution of the largest scale in human history to the Biden campaign by suppressing and changing the way search algorithms works. So there, I'm actually definitively convinced that it changed the outcome of the election. I haven't said that it didn't in the case of the ballot fraud. I just said truthfully, and it's a fact now. And I'm very open to data to convince me of it. I haven't seen data of that scale on the election changing outcome, and that's what I've said, and I'm open about that. But I just want to be clear always where my views are and where they aren't.
That face.
And so that's, I think, a fair discussion for us to have. And the only thing about the big pharma piece, because I've heard this criticism, is my entire business that I started, I just want people to understand this. It was all about challenging the hypocrisy of big pharma, developing medicines that they had purposefully cast aside in coordinated behavior. And so to call me part of big pharma when all of them hate me, I mean, not now, they hated me then. It's like the equivalent of calling Rumble part of big tech. And I say this as somebody who personally was one of the earliest private investors, outside investors in Rumble long before it went public. And so that just tells you where I'm coming from in addressing that.
Are you currently in a massive multi-$100 million deal with Pfizer?
I'm not in
Roivant?
any deal. I'm not affiliated. I founded multiple companies.
Are you the 6th or 7th largest stockholder of
Yes.
Roivant, who is in a multi-$100 million deal with Pfizer?
So
Priovant?
Roivant, I read the public information that you do. I'm not on the board, but Roivant did do a deal that licensed
You were on
a
the
drug
board
from
in
Pfizer.
February when the deal passed last winter.
Yeah, to license a drug of a monoclonal antibody for treating a particular disease, an immunological disease. Yes,
So you're
that is
owned by
exactly.
Pfizer, is what I'm saying. How can we
What?
have someone? How can we
And
have
Rogan, see,
someone
this is the
regulate
difference.
Pfizer?
It's like the equivalent of saying that Rumble is owned by Google because they have done licensing deals with other tech companies. We have to be in a position as a movement to say we compete and win, not just through politics, but in the marketplace. And so the fact
Will
is
you
that this would
admit
take an
that
hour
your
discussion.
Will you admit that your largest source of wealth is tied in a deal with Pfizer? Your Roivant holdings.
That's incorrect. Yeah, it's incorrect.
It's not.
Roivant
How
has-
much is the
Roivant
Pfizer
has
deal
hundreds.
Wait, Rogan, let him just
I have
answer the
no idea.
question first. Go ahead.
Roivant's entire business model was to do deals with pharma companies on drugs they had purposefully abandoned to license them in as part of licensing deals. They've done hundreds of those deals with universities, companies, both large and small. That's the business model of the company. I'm not on the board of that company. I did found the company, and I'm darn proud of it because actually we called a lot of pharma's bluff. And I think the reality is, for the same reason, again, I was one of the first private investors, came in from the outside of the founding in Rumble, challenging big tech. We've got to be thinking bigger than just saying that, hey, we have to turn away from an economy as opposed to winning through that same economy. And
Okay.
the reason, and Candace, I'm being pulled here, but the reason I embrace this discussion, and I just think this is really, really important for our people to understand, and I do say our people, and yes, I say that for the three of us, our people to understand, is that MAGA is bigger than Donald Trump. It is bigger than me. It is bigger than any one of us. Okay, this is a movement that will outlive Donald Trump. This is a movement that will, I think, define the future direction of our political leadership in our country if we get this right. And so one of the things we haven't really done, and you guys started doing it on the vaccine point, I'm bringing to the table in other ways, is have healthy debate within our own movement, okay? Debate on how we actually put America first, how we actually protect the homeland, how we actually create a government that tells the truth to its people. And I think it's really important that we have that discussion without trying to vilify or take someone down. You got the Soros stuff. Well, Trump got a $160 million loan from George Soros. Am I ever going to take him down for that? No, I'm not, because I understand the business conditions under which he did it. And so in our movement, and I think it's different from the neocon establishment that'll come after us and wants to send hundreds of billions of dollars more to Ukraine. But the reason I'm embracing this, the reason my team is like literally wincing at me, trying to drag me to the next thing, but I'm staying on here, is that this is important because MAGA and America First, it is bigger than Donald Trump. And I think we just need to accept that and get it in our head. It's bigger, certainly, than me. I'm the newcomer, so I deserve to be screened and tested just as Trump was put through the ringer back in 2015. And you could play the same game about past political donations or business interests he started or loans he's taken or stances he's taken on the vaccine to try to take down one man. Don't do it to Trump. And I'm not saying this in a self-interested way. Don't approach that the same way with me either. Let's get to the bottom of what advances our movement. We haven't actually had healthy debate within our movement about shared goals. How do we achieve them? That's what I'm bringing to this. I think that will make our movement outlive this election.
He basically saying, hey, man, stop asking me them punk-ass questions and let's get to the real stuff. You're over here trying to hit me with a gotcha moment, and you ain't got nothing.
I don't see myself as running against Trump. I'm running for the America First agenda for this country. And I think there is, amongst thoughtful people as we're having here, room for good discussion on exactly how we do that. And I'll invite more of it. It's part of why I came on. Rogan, I appreciate you, actually. I know that you're not some troll that's just in this to sort of take a guy down. So I took this seriously. I do take it seriously because I think it's an important evolution for our movement. It is bigger than me. It is bigger than any one man. And if we approach it with that spirit, I will continue to engage as openly as I have here.
Well, that was long, but that was great. I've been watching a lot of Vivek clips recently, and I wanted to do a reaction to him. I didn't really have one that I was like, oh, this is the one. But the way he handled this, the way he took these questions and these issues one-on-one and broke it down and just totally obliterated all this dude's arguments, I rock with him, man. I rock with him for sure. And hopefully, you know, y'all rock with him too. We'll see what happens. But as always, thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, one love.